When you talk to Julie Andrews, you can find out a lot about many things, from singing to humanitarian work to work on Broadway, children's books, and we can also find out about whangdoodles. I've interviewed you 3 times now, and never yet have I heard what a whangdoodle is. I haven't yet read the book.
You should go to your Webster's Dictionary, and you will discover that it is in the dictionary, and it is described as a humorous, mythical creature of fanciful and undefined nature. So make of that what you will.
Sounds like a nice muse for any writer to have.
Well, fanciful and undefined, it gives me plenty of latitude, and I kind of ran with it.
The words fanciful and undefined, we might not immediately apply them to Julie Andrews. Is that our fault? Is that unfair of us to maybe not know that part of you?
The undefined... well, it depends how you choose to define me, I guess. It's what are you seeing from where you are?
I think many of us see a very proper, a very controlled, very guided kind of person. And maybe that's fair enough as far as it goes.
Well, you'd have to stick around and learn about the rest, I guess.
We're going to be learning while we watch in That's Life about a woman who needs help more than anybody else, but who is herself called upon to help everybody else.
That's a good description of it.
A lot of your acting goes between the lines. It's
sort of the glue, yes.
Inside, yes. Isn't it? Is that a harder kind of role to do than when you're talking your head off?
It's a nice role. There are all kinds of roles, and you can define them in many different ways, and this is one kind of a role, and it is that she is the glue that holds the whole film or the whole family together, too. And it's a very interesting exercise in kind of restraint and control, because she really doesn't explode until very close to the end of the film.
And that is such a convincing explosion that I guess it left me thinking, when are we going to see the Julie Andrews dramatic role in which that happens all the time?
Well,
catches us unawares. I understand there's something coming up.
Yeah, there is a wonderful film coming out later in the year that I was fortunate to do in London earlier this year, and it's called Duet for One, and it's again about a woman in a very life-threatening situation.
Brings you back to music?
Yes, in a very different way. It's about a violinist who, in the prime of her life and her career, and she's a very famous violinist, gets struck down with multiple sclerosis, and it's how she deals with it and how her family around her deal with it.
To have a film take on an issue like that, is that in itself close to your heart?
It became very close to my heart. I was a little nervous and hesitant about getting into it because I had to really examine my own feelings about death and mortality and illness and how I would feel to lose my career or my voice or whatever. And once I was working on it, I one day suddenly felt like I took a great big plunge and went under and came up, and I was in the role. But for a little while I flirted around it. I hope it was just a couple of weeks before I really, found where I was going.
There must have been a moment, too, in the filming of That's Life where all of you maybe had been sort of warily circling around the subject and the project. I mean, there you are in your own home. But then suddenly you took a plunge.
Yeah.
And it was a movie now, not just
I think that we had a lot of time, not a lot of time to prepare for it, because it was one of Blake's wonderful ideas that happened very quickly. It came together very fast. But having said that, we did as much preparation as we could, and we did have the film was very much improvised. Not that we made it up on the spur of the moment, far from it. It was outlined very carefully, and our characters were delineated very carefully. But within each day's work, it was contributive and
was there any stiffness at first, however, precisely because you were on home ground?
Well, I think Blake made it easier for us, and what I was going to say was that before we even started filming, we had a couple of days where we all sat around and just talked and threw in a lot of stuff. And then as the filming went on, more and more as we became involved, it was very easy to say, oh my gosh, we must remember to say that because it would be important, and it was a very stimulating way to film.
Could we also find a very interesting film being made about this film being made?
I suspect you could. Yes, art imitating life, imitating art, imitating life.
The boxes within the boxes.
That's right. I think there was somebody shooting a documentary. I haven't seen it, so I have no idea what they finally captured.
Well, in your family life, have you ever toyed with the idea of taking video movies of the family growing up and maybe improvising little stories with the family members prior to
Never
that?
thought about that part of it, but I'm always very grateful when we have taken family movies. I'm a great believer in albums and cine films and anything you can do, because they are. I mean, I've always had this fantasy: if my house burned down, what would I grab? And it would be photographs, because you can't repeat them.
And families now have, through video, the capability of doing that so
yes,
easily.
and having a kind of diary of their lives, which is wonderful.
Do you think maybe that's a kind of a good thing for a family, maybe to work out inner tensions, to have movies being made about themselves?
Well,
as a parent, would you ever?
Yes, I think I know it's been done on television in documentary form, and I think it is quite a good catharsis. I mean, you really, to a degree, are able to stand back and take a look at yourself and have it crystallized, because very few people are able to turn around and look at themselves that clearly. You can see others very clearly, but not yourself.
As a big fan of your singing, why don't we hear you singing more in the last few years?
I would like to know that too.
Well, let's speculate about that a little bit. What has to happen for it to happen?
Well, I do sing more than you probably know, in that I do the odd concert here and there, and I am planning a couple of things also. But to go back to Broadway would require an enormous amount of time and a lot of sacrifice on my husband and children's part. So I couldn't ask that of them unless it was something so unbelievably special, or something that we did as a group. But I'm hoping that that I'm not finished with doing film musicals, because they're a joy. It's just that they're not made very much these days.
I can't help but be curious if there's been a time in your own family when you have sung at an event, a party, and you sat back and thought, that's as good as I've ever sang, but nobody will know.
That's happened. Oh, believe me, that's happened. And in practice it happens too. You know, when you're practicing, you think, God, that's good today. Hope I can keep it that way.
Aptly spoken from the expert of Whang Doodles. That's a book that Julie Andrews wrote, in case you're wondering. I'm John Tibbetts with Julie Andrews, and that's Life here in Toronto for KCTV5.